was a familiar feeling today, even now. You know, I actually got to sleep in a little bit. I woke up and, well, my wife was at the dining room table doing work, and I didn't have a whole lot of stuff to do. I just kind of had to wait around and do not much of anything because it looks like Lockdown Part 2 is upon us.
Lockdown Dos, the revenge.
La Revenga, yeah.
Yes.
So I had a very familiar feeling of being simultaneously overtired and yet sleepy, if that makes sense. Like I overslept what I normally do on days like this, but I was also I was sleepy until just recently. I got to close my eyes for a little bit and just felt very lazy.
Yeah, obviously, Lockdown 2, it's unfortunate. I would obviously prefer there not to be a Lockdown 2.
Yes.
Of course, going to miss friends and family. Of course, it's really hard for those people who are most at risk from the coronavirus and, people whose businesses are going out of business, all that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm excited for all that. But I will say, Lockdown 2, mostly bad. But... Will, I'm gonna watch a lot of movies.
Well, that's true. I mean, and it's pretty fortunate. I have to say, because now I have a job, a different job than this one, that allows me to work from home. So that's pretty good. And my wife is safe. She can also safely work from home. All we have to do is go out and get sustenance. We can have fast food delivered to us. And we're just going to take it as it comes. Of course, we're talking about lockdown measures here that have just come up in Nova Scotia, the recent bursting of the Atlantic bubble, because that's where we're coming to you from. We being Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. My name's Will Young, and, it looks like Lucas Mancini, we might not be seeing each other in person for a little while. Not that we were constantly, but we did get a nice little face-to-face a few months ago.
Yeah, luckily for the Elwood City Limits listeners, no in-person contact required to record this show. We've been doing this over the World Wide Web for years now, so no worries. Lockdown 2 will not impact your regularly scheduled ECL content.
No, at least not practically, like emotionally and mentally.
And maybe that's part of the fun, right?
So welcome everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed the most recent content, including our interview with Dallas Joe Kick. And we want to thank once again Dallas for coming onto the show. We really appreciated him. He was very giving of his time. He was a great interview. And we're glad to be able to present another one to you as a little, I guess it's a pre-Christmas, a month early Christmas present. But we still have some stuff on the way as well. And of course, as Lucas himself said, we have plenty of ways to keep this show going despite not being in person. And despite not being in person, we hear plenty from you as well over at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. So I opened up the emails, and we have a couple for you today. One of them actually is something of a retraction, an edit, perhaps a clarification of an error. On the last episode, we had an email from Josh who wanted to apologize for calling me Mike instead of Will. He says one of my former classmates was named Mike Lucas. Since the email was about my old school and hometown, I was also thinking about my old classmates, and I mistakenly thought the name Mike was somehow right. That's okay, Josh. It was all in good fun. I just really wasn't sure where you got Mike from, and now I see. That is quite a bit clearer. It's all good. No problems here.
The secret third member of the ECL crew, Mike.
Speaking of lockdown, that was something that when lockdown started, that was kind of the joke of like, if you and or whoever you're living with, instead of blaming stuff on them, you have to invent a third imaginary person to blame stuff on. So if anything goes wrong with the podcast, if we ever miss a date, if we ever have technical issues, it's all Mike's fault.
That's Mike, yeah. If the Twitter account ever gets canceled, Will wasn't posting that day. It was Mike.
It was Mike. That was completely Mike. So please Please be gentle. Our next one is from Kat, who has a question. If you could see a sequel to any episode, Arthur episode, which would it be? For me, it would be Arthur, It's Only Rock and Roll. I'd love to see a battle of the bands happening, and You Stink has a reunion. As for the famous band that would be hosting, I think it would be fun to see Fall Out Boy in the Arthur universe, but that's just me. Hope you're both staying safe and sane. So a sequel to an episode, I think that... I feel like we're bringing this up every episode. I think Lucas, you've said on the show you would like to see a follow-up to Grandpa Dave's Old Country Farm, for one.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even seen Grandpa Dave in a while. It's interesting because I know that we've levied the criticism against specific episodes of like, oh, I don't think this tied everything up the way I would want it to. I feel like there's like a whole another episode of content. But the episodes are kind of the ones that are intended to be sort of standalone. The ones that aren't two-parters really are kind of standalone in that I feel like there's not a lot other places for them to go. Off the top of my head, and this is kind of a weird thought, but the one with where Toady gets introduced. Just because we never, I feel like there was more stories to tell with Toady, and because he kind of essentially gets retconned out of the show, we never really get to see them. And I think there's other places they could have gone with the Toady character, like DW having her own pet, and then the kind of adventures that Toady could embark on. But really, Toady only shows up in the Kate and Pal episodes briefly, right? Like for a quick cameo. But I would love to see, an episode about like DW and Toady's relationship. I forget that. What is that episode called, Will? It's something Spanky.
So Long Spanky.
So Long Spanky. So that would be my choice, as a sequel to So Long Spanky.
Or maybe a prequel with Spanky. Give us an idea of what that character was like before they who died in the first 2 minutes on screen. I think that there are some things in the earlier seasons that kind of they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. So Toady was one of them. I would like to... in fact, I'm surprised we've never really gone back to the aliens that stole DW's Snowball. And because that was that was one of the prime examples. If you go back to the episode where we covered that from the first season, I think that was one of our first reckonings with the magical realism of the world of Arthur. And and it never really, there was not a whole lot of explanation to it. It's like, yeah, it was aliens all along, and then just, not really much beyond that. I'm really surprised we haven't dipped back into that, or maybe we will at some point. We have an anonymous listener who discovered the podcast when we were covering Season 8, so a little while ago. They really like it a lot. Always interesting to listen to. Even if I don't agree with your guys' thoughts on an episode, it's great to hear why you feel that way. My top 5 characters are... starting 5 going up. George, Molly, Mr. Ratburn, Fern, and Binky. Oh, very close to ours, I would say.
Yeah, solid list.
And my favorite episodes are Fern's Slumber Party from Season 2. It's a good one. And Season 16's The Last Tough Customer, which I'm excited for you guys to cover. Well, I'm sure we'll get to it by early 2022. I'm also really interested to see you guys get to Season 12's War of the Worms. So that's another kind of, I always appreciate it when people signpost, oh, watch out for this episode. It's a good one. I guess if I wanted to ask you guys something, what are your top 3 favorite Arthur characters? I'm sure both of you have Binky as your favorite. I can guess possibilities for the others, but I'm curious to know for sure. Hope you continue to thrive in the future and you still enjoy doing the podcast. So top 3, and this is kind of, we've definitely covered this before, but I think it's good once in a while to take the temperature and kind of see where we're at with the show.
Yeah, I definitely think we have answered this before, and if I contradict myself, it's all about... Some days, my top 3 Arthur characters is wherever the wind blows, right?
Yeah.
I will say the one that is ever unchanging is the number 1 spot, which is, of course, Binky.
Yep,
I think Binky, we can agree, is, to this day, still probably the best Arthur character in terms of he's got the most depth, he grows and changes the most of any character, and he's just got a lot going on, and most consistently has the best episodes.
Yes.
And then, the next 2, this is where it gets difficult. I think, and maybe it's just because she's fresh in my mind, but I think I go 2 and 3, Molly and Mr. Ratburn.
Okay.
But, depending on the day you ask me, it could be Binky, DW, Buster. It could be Binky, throw Mr. Haney in one of those lists. It changes all the time, but it's always Binky on top. What about yourself, Will?
Binky on top as well, and that doesn't really change. But you're right. The other two are very much floating, and it kind of depends on like who we've seen recently, who we've covered in like the last maybe season or two of content. So because I do like a lot of the characters, I would say that with characters like Molly and Mr. Ratburn, and I would also extend this to Fern as well, who is a favorite of mine, I feel like I just don't see them enough in order to really like latch onto them, or at least we're kind of going through a bit of a drought of Fern and Mr. Ratburn. Fern did get her own episode semi recently, but I need more. Like I do need to see them a bit more.
Last season was DW heavy. There was like,
yes.
I would say it was 50% DW episodes and then 50% the rest of the cast. So let's hope we see a little bit more cast variety in season 11.
So I'd say right now, as of November 2020, I would say Binky's number 1. I would put Buster at number 2, because I think Buster's a real MVP. I think that is very likable and consistently has at least a good line or two. And I enjoy a lot of his stories as well. Not all of them, but most of them. And number 3, I think I might just be lame and put in that tie of like, all right. So I won't be lame. I'll say Fern. I really like when Fern shows up, and she could easily be number 2 if I saw her as much as Buster, but we don't. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. We have one here from John, one of our first patrons, John DeLong. On the last episode of the main show, there was a brief discussion about Patreon stretch goals. Will said that it felt right to ask the patrons if they were on board for a review episode for the Monster Hunter movie before promising it.
Yes, John.
And meanwhile, Lucas insinuated that he simply wanted to torture Will, regardless of whether or not it was popular with the patrons. As your first patron, that's right, he was our very first, I believe it is not only my right, but my sacred responsibility to speak on behalf of your Patreon supporters and say that any stretch goal where Will has to watch a bad movie is always the will of the people. And quite frankly, if it's not, it should be. All right, noted. Literally, the only thing stopping me from putting that poll up is just waiting. I'm waiting to see if indeed what Monster Hunter is going to be doing. I don't want to put the poll out and it's like, oh, it's coming out next December. Then I'll look foolish.
A couple of things. First of all, I do thank you, John, for writing in, and I wholeheartedly agree with the endorsement that Will should have to watch the Monster Hunter movie, whether he likes it or not. I will say that all Patreon subscribers are created equal, and whether you were the first or the most recent, we love you all. And secondly, everybody's assuming the Monster Hunter movie is going to be bad. Now, folks, there is a chance Will could love the Monster Hunter movie. Who's to say?
It's always there. It's a not zero chance. And speaking of movies to watch for Patreon, there was a trailer for one released today that I think, no question, is one that we're going to have to end up seeing. And that's the movie adaptation of Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Oh, man, I don't think I've seen this. Is it live action?
Yeah. It's just
who do they got playing Emily Elizabeth?
I don't know. They haven't revealed any characters yet. It was literally just like a quick teaser, and it's just with a big dog colored red. And it is live. It is live action.
So I'm assuming it's a CGI dog.
Yeah. So I mean, it's in our wheelhouse. Like if who
do we got on to direct this? Clifford the Big Red Dog. Let's see if there's any. Casting news.
John ends off here. No big deal. If any of you ECL listeners happen to be fans of Liverpool Football Club and are looking for a new podcast, check out the Canada Cop. That's Cop spelled K-O-P. Available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. That's a cheap plug for our friend and friend of the show, John. Keep an eye on the Patreon for that poll sooner rather than later. Any info about Clifford?
The first thing that comes up when you Google Clifford the Big Red Dog movie 2020 is a Vulture article that says, the new Clifford the Big Red Dog is terrifying.
It's just a golden retriever painted red in Photoshop. It's really not that bad.
Darby Camp. Are you familiar with Darby Camp plays Emily Elizabeth?
No.
Keaton Thompson.
Oh my God.
It doesn't say who he's playing. And that's pretty much, Rosie Perez is in it.
All right.
Russell Peters is in the film. John Cleese.
Okay.
Who do we got here? Who do we got signed on to direct this masterpiece? Walt Becker. Let's see. Let's see if Walt Becker... Oh, man, Will.
What are we looking at here?
Oh, goodness. Would you like to know the 3 other films Walt Becker is known for directing? Oh, boy.
Tell me. Come on, tell me.
Van Wilder.
Great start.
Oh, Will, it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Wild Hogs.
Oh, no.
And Old Dogs.
Oh, man.
Wild Hogs might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, Wild Hogs is a real whole...
That movie is like
Hog is
Jack
right.
and Jill tier in terms of like, it's not even like, haha, this movie's bad funny. It's like, this is, please someone turn it off.
Great. So I guess we can expect great things for...
See, now Monster Hunter not seeming so bad now, Will.
We'll try and cover Clifford sometime soon on For the Kids, and maybe we can give kind of a happy alternative to whatever Clifford the Big Red Dog the movie may be. Our last one here from Funith. Do you guys have a list of worst Arthur characters? You guys comment on characters at their worst in certain episodes, so I've been wondering if there's an Arthur character you like the least if you were to make the list. My least favorite of all the Arthur characters is LaDonna Compson, who we've only seen if you have listened to the most recent commentary that we did on DW and the Beastly Birthday, which is available to patrons right now. Once you get to the Flash animated series, they introduce her as a new character of the cast that you could classify as the Poochie of the series, minus the satire. It's like the writers were desperate for a gimmick to add to the new seasons and set up a spinning dartboard with any random quirks and traits they thought up off the bat and threw blindfolded to whatever stuck. I'm not alone in that sentiment, since whatever forum I look up about the character seems to be filled with unanimous disdain when all I type in the Google search engine is LaDonna Compson. I can't wait for you guys to get to the new seasons so I can hear your takes on said character. Didn't get a good enough feel for her in the more recent Arthur episodes we've talked about, so can't say one way or the other. Least favorite?
I know yours, Will. It's of course our favorite character, mystery grade 3 student from the other class. Room.
Yeah. I think even then it's just like I'm starting to feel like a performing monkey. People are either, whether in the emails or whether it's you, people elbowing me in the ribs and just like, yeah, you hate that guy, don't you, Will? I'm like, I guess. He says like 2 lines and he just says it.
Excuse me, Will. What are those 2 lines, by the way? Pray tell.
Shut up! Why are you doing this to me?
I just don't remember. It's escaped me, the 2 lines.
What rhymes with orange? No, that was bad. What rhymes with orange? And then Arthur giving an appropriate angry face. No, that one's more funny. I think that's just something I should go back to that episode and listen to my initial reaction. I wonder if it was so hateful that 4 years later people are still talking about it.
Well, speaking of kind of time healing the hate,
yes,
if you will, I think years ago I would have had many answers to this question. I used to really not like Muffy.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely used to like detest Prunella and Prunella's older sister. What's her name? Rubella. Actually, you know what? I will say I'll probably actually still say Rubella is probably my least favorite character. Though I will say Prunella has grown on me greatly these past 4 years, and now I would count her amongst the characters I enjoy. But that's, I think, a testament to the quality of Arthur's characters is that even the flawed ones. I actually really, really. Oh, you know what? Do you know who's my least favorite character? I got it.
I think I know, and it might be mine too. Is it the Brain?
It is the Brain.
Yeah.
As of late, the way the Brain has been written, the Brain at his best, like, there's some really good Brain episodes. Like, remember the episode where the Brain has, like, really good manners, and then when the Arthur goes to the Brain's house,
Yeah.
he's surprised. Like, that's, I think, the Brain at his best. But in the past few seasons, the Brain has literally been written as Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, and he is the only character maybe in the cast where I think he's got X-Pac heat with me, where he doesn't really add anything to an episode, and in fact, he could be quite irritating most of the time. Whereas, characters like Muffy, at least Buffy's of course intentionally annoying, but they do really interesting things with her, especially lately. The Brain, they've just kind of done the inverse, where the Brain's been dumbed down, ironically, dumbed down until he's just this kind of one-dimensional science guy, and there isn't really anything else to him.
I agree, and dumbed down or watered down perhaps is
yes.
But you're right, and the thing is that Brain didn't build up the kind of cash with us early on in the series that we're like, oh, but Brain's usually great. We're just like, okay, well now Brain sucks and we don't like him. It's not like, we had a spate of DW episodes that weren't really for us, but it's like DW has been great since the first time she was on the show. So we're just like, whatever. Like DW's time will come again. We have time for her. We have patience for her, and other characters like her. And like you said, Prunella and Muffy, I think, and spoilers for the episode we're going to talk about, have had moments to shine and have had kind of moments to diversify themselves that I think have really worked. At least worked for me. I would say so. Brain's a good one. Brain is one that I intellectually kind of end up disliking because I find him annoying, and I just, especially like his character type that he has to play, I find that annoying.
There's great things they could do with Brain. I like Brain's family and how supportive they are. I love, my favorite thing they did with the Brain character is, his love for old blues music. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But, every time he opens his mouth in an episode lately, I'm cringing.
The other is this is not intellectual at all. It's the Tibble twins. I very viscerally dislike them, and we won't get it. I will save my thoughts on it for right now. That doesn't mean that I think they don't have a place in the show. That doesn't mean that I don't think you can tell good stories with them. But the way that they act, just, I guess maybe it's the non-existent dad within me just kind of raises my blood pressure watching them sometimes. So we'll make it into that a little bit later. Because
I think there might be a little bit of recency bias with that one.
Could be.
I usually actually don't mind the Tibble twins. I think they're pretty funny, but I will say that given the current episode we watched, I might tend to agree with you as of late.
They're rarely allowed to be characters. They're usually just such forces of chaos that if they're around for a long period of time, I just kind of can't stand them. Anyway, thanks everybody for your emails. Some good questions there, and kind of good to take our temperatures on some of the Arthur stuff that sometimes we take for granted. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com if you would like to send us any correspondence that way. We're also available on all of our social media. Now, as we mentioned in the last episode, I'm going to be cutting down on the amount of patrons who are mentioned at the beginning of the episode. So I'm going to be doing about 10 at a time. So if you're a patron and you don't hear your name in this episode, please be patient. I will be getting to it in turn. And of course, this is also a blanket thank you to everybody, patrons like you, including K2 Sonic Fan, Riley Hendrickson, Kelsey Taylor, Girl Cried Comet, Sydney Long, Bob Yee, Robert Morrison, Allison Archambault, Jeffrey Gao, and Hannah Kitten. See, if I limit the amount of people, then that means I can give them all a nice little read, a nice flourish, instead of just because there's like 60 of them to read through. Really appreciate your time and your contributions to the show. And we have continued to enjoy making content for you, like this week's episode of the most recent episode of For the Kids, Dragon Tales. Patrons, if you haven't checked that one out, please do. If that sounds like something you might want to, then feel free to sign up for our Patreon. Okay, so season 11. We are still in the early stages of it, trying to figure out how we feel. And we're talking about Arthur Sells Out. This one has a couple of references to older Arthur material. And in fact, we start off with one with the commercial for Dark Bunny, Revenge of the Moomies.
So I feel like every season, we kind of send this season off being like, okay, this upcoming season, it's uncharted waters. Lucas has finally never seen any of these episodes. It's all going to be fresh. I've definitely seen this sequence before, Dark Bunny and Revenge of the Boobies, because I had this. I didn't remember the rest of this episode, but I do have this like memory of seeing this sequence and being like, whenever they show a video game on Arthur, and because I was this is embarrassing to say, Will, but when I was a little kid,
Yeah.
one might describe me as a gamer. I know. It's a shocking revelation.
Oh my god.
I know. But
we should have talked about this off air.
listen. We're working on all of us. But we should. But my seated past aside, whenever they were showing like a fake game on Arthur, they always make it be like, oh man, I wish this game was real. This game looks cool. And Dark Bunny, Revenge of the Boobies. It follows that tradition. It looks like a fun game, and also immediately you what a way to start off it's not quite starting off the season. This is the second set of episodes, but what a way to start an episode! Just like with this voiceover, I'm like, this isn't Arthur. Who is this? I was immediately engaged.
And it also continues the tradition of video game trailers, sometimes sweetening the content that you're in store for.
That's right, not actual gameplay footage. It's missing that little watermark in the corner. This is a Killzone 2 looking trailer.
Alpha build. This is, of course, a callback to the Season 6 episode Crushed, in which Arthur and his babysitter were playing the Dark Bunny, the original Moomies game. That they didn't end up beating. So this is a sequel. Arthur and Buster are looking at the commercial, and they really, really want it, but of course they don't really have much money. We get an exchange here. Buster says, if I bought everything I ever wanted, I'd have to have so many jobs, I'd never be able to play with the things that I bought. And Arthur adds, just like grown-ups. And that one hurt my feelings.
Yes, it's more true than they could ever know.
So yeah, the conundrum here is that of course they want to get this game, and it's the classic dilemma of childhood, is that you want to get something but you just don't have the money for it. But then Buster comes up with an idea. They find a box of basically junk in Arthur's garage, old toys, kind of memorabilia, that sort of stuff, and they decide to give it a go at selling it. And Buster recommends Arthur sets up ads on the school newspaper's website. So it's not eBay, it's not even really Kijiji. It's like a local ad board for selling stuff. So Arthur decides to adopt the moniker of Toy Guy 22 and put up some ads for, this stuff is, not all of it's bad, but it's dusty or dirty or broken. So it's just kind of old junk that they didn't really have an idea for. This is funny because Arthur putting this stuff up for sale. I'm currently procrastinating putting up some GameCube stuff for sale that I am going to put up through Kijiji and eBay. So this was another you should probably get to that. You could use the money.
Ooh, before you do that, Will, maybe we should talk about that off air.
Well, yeah.
You got any copies of Super Monkey Ball 2?
No, I'm afraid not. No, not that specifically.
Okay.
So Arthur's, he rounds up all this stuff. It's like a collection of tin soldiers. It's an old stuffed hippo that has like a stain on it and all this kind of not great stuff. And he's just like, all right, I'm going to put this up on the website, and this is gonna sell and get me money. And it is kind of cool. We have moved into the era of Arthur where the internet is a thing. So, he gets his mom to help him, and this is something that, feasibly, even though this was like in 2007 or whenever it was, this is feasibly something that a kid Arthur's age could get into and maybe even excel at. But
I think at this time is when I started buying games off Kijiji and stuff.
Interesting. But unfortunately, Arthur is not seeing much success. This is exactly what happens to me when I put something up on Kijiji for what I think is a fair price. But just doesn't
apparently move. The world, Kijiji's over, Will. It's all about Facebook Marketplace.
Is it really?
Yes. I listen, I had the same reaction you did. Everybody's telling me about Facebook Marketplace this, Facebook Marketplace that.
Yeah.
I've been looking for furniture lately for the apartment. And Facebook Marketplace is the Wild West, Will. People are giving away 3-piece couches for $50, antique 3-piece couches. Some people are like, hey, here's these 2 love seats. If you could come get them, they're yours. Like,
yeah,
it is,
classic.
it is wild out there. So that is the place to be.
I'll have to write that down. So they are bemoaning their lack of success to Muffy. And of course, this is exactly the person you want to be talking to. Muffy immediately has ideas about how to sell Arthur's stuff. See, I need some of Muffy's marketing know-how in order to get my Kijiji ads to really hit their zenith. She knows exactly what she's talking about. So she takes them through a whole crash course of how to improve stuff, and it's everything from marketing related jargon to color photos. Because Arthur's just put up like a text ad and it's just like, buy these things, and Muffy is just like, no, we have to take a picture of it. You need to be.
She takes a picture of it with her 3-megapixel camera.
3-megapixel digital camera. Remember having to plug the digital camera into the computer to get the photos off of it?
Those are going to look like some potato-looking pics. Let me tell you something. Those are going to be some rough JPEGs.
Yeah, there's a very specific aesthetic to it. There are certain ways to advertise, like certain words to use. Of just like, this might be later, but eventually she's like, if it's got a little bit of wear and tear to it, say well loved, or if it's falling apart, call it handyman special. We even see her using paint. She's using paint to create like a custom page and to kind of spruce it up a bit. This is actually a cool sequence. I liked this because we see Muffy as the stereotypical rich girl so many times, is that she doesn't know how the world works. She just kind of, wants a lot of things and her dad gets it for her. This is saying that no, Muffy being around, not just a car salesman, but just wealth in general, has made her savvy towards marketing. So she has a lot of transferable skills that she demonstrates in this little montage. She knows how to market. She knows how to write ad copy. She knows how to design. She knows how to use like Photoshop and paint. It's actually really cool. It made me respect Muffy a little more.
And later on in the episode, we learn that she's kind of inherited knowing the legal parameters of marketing and sales and knowing how to kind of exploit those later on in the episode. So the Muffy turns out to be a wealth of knowledge, even the forbidden kind, later on in this episode.
That's right. And her tips all work. Arthur manages to sell all, but even just the most raggedy of some of that stuff.
Buster asks, even the Woogle? Which is a great throwback.
I kind of can't believe that Arthur didn't sell the Woogle faster, because I'm sure that there's some weirdo out there who is like collecting every like Gen 1 Woogle.
I believe that's why it sells. He goes, yeah, some guy needed to complete his collection. But I like the idea of like, everyone is so disgusted by the Woogles. Like, there's been such a hard shift in the culture in regards to everybody wanted a Woogle, and then immediately afterwards, everybody was so over a Woogle.
Yeah.
In our reality, of course he sold the Woogle, right? Of course there's some sort of sicko out there who wants the complete mint in-box Woogle collection. But I love the logic of the Arthur universe that Buster and Arthur are completely mystified by someone wanting a Woogle again. And also, I just like that Woogles keep coming back. I always love it when they... what season was that?
That was like season maybe 3, I want to say.
Yeah, oh my
maybe
goodness,
2.
What a throwback.
Well, it's funny, the Woogle wave really crested like Tiger King did earlier this year. It was like an intense couple of weeks that was over just as quickly as it began, or so it seems. So Muffy is talking about the different ways in which you can advertise your product. So she gives him the example of like, do you think that Bionic Bunny really likes Dippy Doodles? No, he's paid to say that. And Arthur has a great line here. He says, don't tell Buster, it'd crush him. Buster's viewing of Bionic Bunny is based on Bionic Bunny selling whatever the snack product is. That's really good.
This conversation spurned by Muffy talking about how we need like a celebrity endorso.
Yes.
And then Arthur brings up a character that I never thought we were going to see again, Beauregard Poulet. Do you remember, Will, who Beauregard Poulet is?
I certainly do. And Arthur's like, I don't know that many celebrities. I'm like, the hell you don't? Arthur knows so many celebrities. Like,
I believe Arthur knows Slick Willie, a.k.a. President Bill Clinton.
Mr. Rogers? Like, come on.
Yeah.
The list goes on here. And then Muffy encourages him to do a rave.
Wait a minute, yeah, Yo-Yo Ma is like a phone call away.
Yeah, so is Josh Redman. Arthur participates in what Muffy calls a rave, which is basically when you use a chat room or like a public phone call and you do like this kind of fake conversation about how well your stuff is selling. I've never heard of this before.
I've heard of this, and only because I went to PR school and community college, and we had to take like marketing classes, and they talk about this, and this was apparently a real thing back in the day. In our 2020 world, it just seems insane. Like, but I suppose this is just an earlier version of like influencers in a way, right? Because like the whole point of influencers is, well, at least originally, now Gen Z is pretty much impervious to this, but originally when influencers started to prop out, their endorsement meant a lot more than like a celebrity endorsement, because consumers weren't wise to the idea. They thought, oh, okay, this person earnestly enjoys this product, and so their endorsement goes a longer way. Like, oh,
right.
This person actually uses this. I have more trust with them.
And there were maybe less scrupulous ways of hiding the fact that like a post was advertised content.
Yes. Pre-people putting hashtag ad in their posts and stuff like that. So this is kind of an early version of that, of paying someone to have a loud conversation about a product, getting the word on the street, if you will. And this really did happen. I don't know how effective it was. It seems kind of insane, but it is a real thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that I'm glad that you can answer that. It's just I had never heard of that because didn't take advertising in school. I've learned about different forms of advertising here and there, but not that one. So that was actually really interesting to know a bit more about. So this is at the point where Muffy is encouraging kind of less scrupulous methods of advertising the toys that can't be sold. So like this is where we get the conversation about like, the hippo isn't dirty. It's like well loved. This truck isn't breaking down. It's a handyman special. And the big one we get did you notice this is the cameo from the cyber toy that Buster stole?
Yes, I did recognize that. Lots of great throwbacks in this episode. Not only did I not expect to hear about Woogles and Beauregard Poulet, but yeah, I remember to think, and it really goes to show the way kids and their relationship with toys. This was a toy that Arthur and Buster wanted so bad they were risking becoming criminals, and now it's just something that they're trying to get rid of, which is pretty funny.
I should also mention in the scene, so like Arthur goes into the sugar bowl to place a fake phone call about how well his toys are selling, and nobody's really paying attention. DW just goes, "Why are you yelling about yourself?" Because he's like, "Oh, Toy Guy 22 has the best deals in town." So he does end up selling that cyber toy, and the problem is that its arms keep falling off, so it's basically broken, to James, who is
speaking of broken toys. We talked over this, but when Arthur's doing inventory of all of his toys earlier in the episode, there's a part where he's like got 8 cowboys. By the way, 8 of the identical cowboy toy. Don't know how he came across those.
Yeah.
But he gives Kate one of them to play with, and Kate immediately busts it. And then he writes down 7 cowboys, and he takes the toy away, and then Kate starts crying, and then he gives it back. Arthur, my dude, that toy is a choking hazard. Kate should not be playing with that cowboy.
Yeah, it's real pointy, too. Not exactly baby safe. So Arthur has a moment here. So James, like, the arms fall off the toy as he's bringing it out of Arthur's garage, and Arthur's very happy because he finally has the money to buy the video game. And then James is like, "Oh, it's broken." So Arthur has a dilemma to make here. Buster immediately kind of assumes the best and is just like, "Okay, well then Arthur will pay you back." But then Muffy kind of sideways encourages Arthur to be like, "Well, buyer beware."
This is a great.
No refunds.
This is a great kind of analogy for the corporation itself as an entity. Arthur is putting his trust that they'll regulate themselves. Whereas, and what does Muffy do? Well, she does what corporations do, which you give an inch, they'll take a mile. What's great about this whole sequence is that Buster's just like completely aghast and shocked when Arthur's like, yeah, Muffy says it's, all sales are final. And Buster is just like totally shocked that Arthur had this within him.
Yeah, and he reminds Arthur of a time when they were also cheated out of something when they got sea squirrels, which is basically, like sea monkeys. You're supposed to put it in a thing of water and watch it grow, and it totally didn't do that. They just basically got bilked when they were like 4 years old or something. And Buster on his moral high horse here a little bit, he says it's bad enough when grown-ups cheat kids, but when kids cheat kids, it's like a meltdown of the fabric of our society. And who wants melty fabric? So he really guilt trips Arthur here, but it's like it is true. Like Arthur is cheating, like James, who's a 4-year-old, out of what looks to be a matter of cents, like maybe 50 cents. So you can get the video game. And Muffy assures Arthur that he hasn't done anything super wrong. She says, at most, it's a misdemeanor. The worst you'd get is house arrest. But nothing really comes of that. Arthur goes to the store with his ill-gotten gains to buy the video game, but then he decides to look for something else in the last minute before he buys the video game. And we eventually go back to Buster and James. Buster offered to fix the cyber toy, but it seems it can't be fixed. So they are instead playing a game where James flings the robot's arms onto a target that looks like Arthur on the sidewalk.
I love this. It's like the classic, like, use someone you dislike's face as a dartboard.
So Arthur comes up to them. By the way, this is where I made the note. So, of course, we mentioned in the first episode of Season 11 that James's original voice actor is now voicing DW, and we have a different voice actor for James. I think James sounds more grown up with this voice actor.
Mm-hmm. Which I guess makes narrative sense, right? Like, usually the voice actor's voices changing is so noticeable because they'll sound younger, because the voice actors age out of the role because their voices start to change. But James sounding older doesn't sound like that much of a weird adjustment, because naturally, even though the characters don't age, James would sound older.
So instead of buying the video game, Arthur bought James a brand new cyber toy that works perfectly well with his money, and that's kind of Arthur. Arthur has learned his lesson, and but instead of making a sacrifice and actually learning something, it turns out Muffy just buys the video game anyway and lets Arthur and Buster play it.
Well, and then the other kicker is that the video game's not even good. So Muffy's got this. First of all, it looks like it's running on it's either a Dreamcast or a PlayStation 1.
Totally a Dreamcast. It absolutely is a Dreamcast.
And then this whole thing is crazy. So we have this like crazy menu that's like definitely 3D graphics. At first I thought it was going to be like a Crash Bandicoot-like. Then Muffy is navigating the menus with like an on-screen cursor. So this game, predates Destiny, using a fake cursor for its menu navigation, or any other game that does that. And then when we see the game, it's like a Pitfall style side scroller, where the main character does not animate.
It looks like the quality of like an educational game or like a Bible game or something.
Like Math Blaster, sub Math Blaster tier, I would go.
Absolutely sub Math Blaster. Yeah, and they just decide like, oh, well, this kind of sucks. And I actually really liked this because it's a child's first crappy game. And it's like we all have that experience of the first truly bad game where we, even as children, were like, this sucks. Like, video games can be bad.
I remember buying Pokemon Revolution for the Wii, or Pokemon Stadium Revolution. I don't remember. There was like a sequel to Pokemon Stadium on the Wii that was like, if you didn't have Pokemon Diamond or Pearl, it was essentially useless. And I remember that was the first time I returned a game I bought the same day I bought it.
Wow. How old were you?
Oh, geez. Let's figure it out. I bought it on launch day, so let's see. Pokemon. It would have been the Wii, so it would have been probably around when this episode came out, actually. Let's see. Yeah. Pokemon Revolution.
So while you look that up, I was the same person. I kind of got video games a bit late, so I was like...
Wow, December 14th, 2006. It would have been right around when this Arthur episode was out. Pokemon Battle Revolution.
Almost 14 years to the day. So I was like slobberingly grateful for any video game that I got for a long time. It took me a while to understand that the games I was playing were like bad. So the one that sticks out to me is like the first time I played Superman 64, which is like one of the classic bad games. But it's like I liked Superman. I loved playing my Nintendo 64. I remember renting that and being like, why is nothing working? Why isn't this like why can't I beat this? Like why isn't this like playing well? And that's was my first taste of like, video games can actually be bad. So that's that I just ran into that classic example right there off the bat. So they decide to stop playing the game after they see how bad it is, and Arthur says, if you're going to try and sell that, don't call me. That's the end of the episode. All right, so let's. So we've got that one in the bag. Now we're going to be checking out a bit of a different narrative after this.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas from the Elwood City Limits podcast, and if you love ECL, there's a couple of ways to keep up with us. You could go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast, that's our Twitter. We take questions on Tumblr. It's elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. There is an Instagram as well, Elwood City Limits on Instagram. Of course, if you want to donate to the show and get exclusive content, whether that's our full-length commentary of the Arthur movies, our brand new bi-weekly PBS Kids review show, as well as our video game movie reviews with the Sonic movie review and Pikachu movie review, you can check out patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And that's also going to get you access to the Elwood City Limits Discord, which me and Will like to post in from time to time. And if you want that sweet, sweet Elwood City Limits merch, check out teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. You can listen to the podcast at libsyn.com/Elwood City Limits, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and there's other podcast apps like Stitcher, and if we're not on your favorite app, let us know. And where can you let us know? Well, that's going to be at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. That's also where you can send us a question, and we'll read it on the show. Finally, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to tell a friend who likes animation or Arthur or just podcasts in general, and to go to our iTunes page and rate us out of 5 stars. Apparently, that helps podcasts out. Bye, everybody!
Well, I mentioned earlier that my patience runs thin for the Tibble twins, and unfortunately, they are the focus of this story called Mind Your Manners. But I'll tell you who I have a lot of time for. I have a lot of time for Mrs. Tibble. When we start the episode off, she is placing a call to Grandma Thora about maybe being able to go out and trying to find a babysitter, and that just made me want an episode where Mrs. Tibble and Grandma Thora have a girls' night.
They're gonna go see a movie, and this makes me it begs the question: what movie would Grandma Thora and Mrs. Tibble be going to see? My first inclination is, of course, every old person's favorite movie of all time, My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh yeah,
which famously was in theaters extremely long because old people simply kept going to go see it. Mm-hmm. But that movie came out in 2002. This would have bin like 2006. So, Will, what are these two grandmas, planning on going to go see?
Well, Lucas, I think that's a really good question. I kind of wish I'd prepared for it, so I'm feverishly preparing for it now. I'm going to 2007 in film, and I'm going to go down to the
2007
end.
In film is a great... It is probably, of the aughts, my favorite year of movies, by the way.
So I'm going to go down to the June releases. And I'm going to take a look through here and see what exactly... So I'm going through the June releases. I'm going to say that there's might be not too much that would be rolling over from May. There's probably something that I am forgetting, but I'm just going to go with the main releases in June. Now, maybe they're going to see A Mighty Heart starring Angelina Jolie.
I would say Oh man, can I just also again? 2007 is like the 1999 of the 2000s. There's like some incredible movie. No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood, American Gangster, Michael Clayton, Into the Wild, the remake of Funny Games, Sunshine, the assassination of Jesse James, Death Proof, some Darjeeling Limited rather, Juno, Ratatouille, all-time great year for movies. That being said, and this might not be accurate to the month, the movie I think Grandma Thora would be asking to go see is probably Elizabeth the Golden Age.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking at the Wikipedia article now. The only other outside chances I did dip into May a little bit. So at the beginning of June was released. Sorry, it's you know what was released in June that they might be seeing? La Vie en Rose, starring Marion Cotillard. So that sounds like something that's you know what, that's going to be my pick. I think they're going to go see La Vie en Rose. But yeah, 2007, excellent year for movies, as you mentioned, for all those reasons and more. So yeah, Mrs. Tibble is looking through a website called Extreme Sitters, which she finds by going to the search engine called Woohoo, not Yahoo, Woohoo. And she finds the website Extreme Sitters, one of whom is like a lion tamer.
Oh, so just a quick note on this, and again, I brought this up before, but in the early seasons of Arthur, there was always like kind of a very, very, very loose connection between the two episodes, or the two stories in one episode, rather, right? So it wouldn't be like the main plot line, but there would be some kind of connecting tissue. And in this episode, it's people using computers is like the loose thread that thematically connects these two episodes.
Loose indeed. I didn't even think about that. But you're not wrong. One of them is like a lion tamer who's like I think he's like Australian, just like, "I'll whip those boys into shape, I will." And
it's a very obviously Bruce Dinsmore.
Yes, very good ear. I noticed that as well. And there's another one who's like a folk singer who is barely hanging on, who says, "If you're happy and you know it, you should stop. If you're naughty and you know it, you should stop." That's it. So she can't. Mrs. Tibble can't find any suitable sitter, so it looks like she won't be going out at all. And it's like as the Tibbles are wreaking havoc in the background, and this is
not only that. The Tibbles lay eyes on the folk singer, and they're like, "Oh, I want to like fill her shoes filled with pudding or something." Like they're already planning like what kind of devious torture they would put that poor woman through.
Yeah, and poor Mrs. Tibble. We know so much about her, and I'm so curious to know what she really feels about taking care of them. Now I know that she loves them, and I think a lot of her actions in this episode and in previous episodes are much to the point that she does love Timmy and Tommy. But I do want to see her when she's not being like perfect grandma. So the episode starts with DW and Emily in the sandbox as DW brings out her farm animals to play with, and Emily brings out hers, which is like a rainbow-colored ox that she got from a like Cirque du Soleil type of production that she went to see with her grand-mère, which immediately I had to roll my eyes, just like, oh, she would call her grand-mère. Give me a break. But then the Tibbles interrupt by like basically digging themselves in the sand and like spraying sand everywhere and just being the menaces that they are. This is, this is the kind of visceral reaction I have to the Tibbles, and I personally wasn't this type of kid, and I wasn't really friends with these types of kids, so I don't have a lot of patience for it. And I know that there are people out there who are way better at dealing with these types of kids, and I'm just not. I have no time for it.
Well, Will, you're talking to one. I had, as a child, what you would call behavioral problems. Nowadays, they call it ADHD.
Right.
So I think I have a little bit more sympathy for the Tibbles because of that kind of lived experience, but I do not blame you, especially in this episode, because boy howdy do they ever push the limits.
Yeah. Constantly running around, and I should say that Emily was spending time with her grand-mère for Grandparents' Day, And DW says, I made my grandma a card for Grandparents' Day.
By the way, can we go back? I might add Emily to the list of least favorite characters.
Emily's a good one. I'm surprised that we forgot about her, but I think that proves
it's hard to hate on a toddler, I think, is why, or like a preschooler rather. But oh boy.
You're right. She often gets a lot of flack from us, and I would say rightfully so. But yeah, the Tibbles interrupt them, and they kind of ask them what they did for their grandmother for Grandparents' Day, and they're like, we forgot. Maybe we should do something. So they kind of roll it over in their heads a little, as much as they can roll something over in their heads, and they see an advertisement on TV for like an Italian restaurant. And so they're like, okay, we should take Grandma there. We have $3. We can pay for it. They also make mention, their initial thing is like, we could take her to a wrestling match. And then they start fighting each other. And the idea of going to a wrestling match or to a restaurant just made me very, very jealous. Talk about lockdown. That's kind of what came to mind for me. So the thing being here that, they want to take Grandma to a restaurant, but as Grandma knows, but they don't, the Tibbles can't be taken anywhere. They wake up Grandma at 5:30 the next morning to serve her breakfast in bed, but of course they pour the milk on the bed by accident. And Grandma is like, they say that, they want to wish her a happy Grandparents' Day. And this is where Mrs. Tibble, I keep calling her Grandma and Mrs. Tibble because I keep forgetting that we know her as Mrs. Tibble, that they say like they want to take her to a restaurant, and Mrs. Tibble's like, I don't know. Remember the last time we did that? And it was at a restaurant called Mill Creek Munch, which is in the Mill Creek Mall in Elwood City, where, the Tibbles just kind of did their thing. They fought, they, sprayed each other with food, they had a big food fight, and the manager kicked them out. So Grandma is Mrs. Tibble, is very beaten down by them.
By the way, the manager of the Mill Creek Munch, throwaway character of the week. Look at that guy's toupee.
He's very angry. He's very, I would say righteously so.
He definitely, they nailed like the small business owner look though, with his he's got this weird slouching posture. And he's just he just looks like the type of guy who's like, and hey, rightfully so, but get these kids out of my business.
Grandma, okay, sorry. Mrs. Tibble, very beaten down by the way that they are, is just like, why don't we just have some cake at home? And there's a couple of reads in this episode where Mrs. Tibble sounds like battered almost. She's just like, oh, that's okay. She puts a little willowiness into her voice and just like, oh my God, just living with these monsters for time on end. And you're right, Lucas, there are plenty of kids who are like this in one form or another, and they're not monsters, but the Tibbles we rarely get to see them be better than this. So we only get to see the bad days. We don't see the good ones.
And speaking of bad days, we kind of double down, because if watching the Tibbles kind of abjectly torture their grandmother isn't bad enough, we then cut to this sequence of the Tibbles essentially preparing to go do a dinner for Mrs. Tibble, and it's just them basically doing improv comedy in the playground, and this was this just gets worse and worse and worse as it goes on, in terms of intentionally so, but in terms of if you thought the Tibbles were annoying before, wait till this sequence happens, because it's even DW, who people have problems with, or we've said last season was really DW heavy, and sometimes DW gets on people's nerves. Very rarely does DW relish in her annoying qualities in the way the Tibbles do in this sequence, where they're just like you said, chaos incarnate.
Yeah, and before we do get to that, they're having lunch together, and the Tibbles are having jam sandwiches, and the jam's spurting out of their sandwiches onto themselves, and they're just kind of not really fussed about it. And they ask DW to help them with table manners, and DW rightfully says, no, I'm done teaching the Tibbles. And so you're right, they do have a sequence outside where they do try and do it themselves, which is, well, it was always going to be folly. So Timmy, Tommy's pretending to be Mrs. Tibble, and Timmy is serving her. And Tommy's like, may I please have some juice? And Timmy just pours it on the table.
And then he pours himself a glass.
And, and then, would you like some cookies, mashed or crumbled? And they say mashed, and they just mash them up in the juice. And I really thought,
Also, wait a minute. No wonder the Tibbles behave so poorly. Look at how many cookies their grandma packed up for lunch. Do you know what kind of sugar rush that would give a kid that age? There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's like 12 cookies, if not more.
So many. Even if you divide it in two, 6 is a lot of cookies for one kid. So they mash it up. They mix it in the juice. It creates kind of like a paste almost, and they're just rolling around in it. I really I expected them to just eat it straight off the table like little stupid piglets. I was
even worse. They start smacking each other with this concoction. This
right,
juice,
of course.
Keep in mind, this is juice mixed with crumbs of cookie, and then they're smacking each other in the face with it.
Right. So that was a complete failure. So they are incapable of teaching themselves. They need to learn from somebody else, proper table manners. So they enlist the help of Molly and James, which this right away I was like, Molly and the Tibbles. This is a combo I never knew that I wanted. Because Molly can be cool, but she's also can be no nonsense as well. So they decide to take them to the sugar bowl and kind of test them out, see where they're at. So they do the right thing first by letting them sit down. But then, what do they do? They start screaming for some reason. Do you remember why?
I don't remember either, but, it's the Tibbles, you guys. You can imagine what they're doing.
So they start... man, it's going to drive me nuts. I forget exactly why. They ask for root beer, and then they just basically start yelling, and everybody starts looking at them, and immediately Molly's like, all right, get out. We're leaving. And they're like, well, what did we do? So instead, not even teaching them table manners, Molly's trying to teach them social cues, which I also have the note here, Molly's the coolest. I love her. Because she's trying to tell she's like, would you like it if you were trying to eat and somebody was screaming in your face? Oh, that was it. They said, we want ice cream. I scream, you scream, we all scream. And they're just yelling at the top of their lungs. So Molly is being very strict with them and just would you like that? As I said, would you like it if somebody was screaming in your face while you were trying to eat? And they're like, I guess not. It's just, I am trying to rein in my visceral feelings of anger towards them because they're young and they literally don't understand. They just don't understand what kind of nuisances they're being. So Molly gives them the order of, when you're in public, stop, look, and listen. And that's what you should be doing to make sure that you are not disturbing anybody and that you're being as good as you possibly can be, which is a kind of social nuance that the Tibbles obviously hadn't learned yet. And I thought it was a good kind of way to sum up exactly, going beyond table manners. So we do get a little montage of the Tibbles learning to stop, look, and listen. My favorite was the first one. They go into the library and they start loudly struggling over a book, and they're just like, wait a second, stop. And they look around and they see everybody quietly reading or browsing, and it's very, it's a library. It's very toned down. They're just like, oh, okay. Shh, we need to be quiet. And then just go they start struggling over the book quieter, which I thought was funny. They also have some other places where they kind of do the stop, look, and listen thing. Using utensils at during a meal with Mrs. Tibble, which apparently they had to be taught. Holding the door open for Mrs. Tibble as she's going in with the groceries. They're just kind of learning to pick up on social cues so they don't need to be told everything. And they decide to put themselves to the test. When they go to the mall with Mrs. Tibble, they ask to go to Mill Creek Munch. And because they want to prove that they can be taken somewhere nice to treat their grandma. So they're being nice, they're being quiet, they're on good behavior. Timmy accidentally elbows his glass of orange juice, and it spills everywhere. And everybody kind of looks at them. And Tommy, you can see the gears turning in Tommy's head because he's just like, okay, that means that it's time for me to spill mine. And then they stop, look, and listen. And Timmy just goes, I'm sorry, Grandma, I didn't mean to. And of course, everybody, as Mrs. Tibble says, everybody spills from time to time. It's okay. So they just clean it up, and they go about their day, and it's fine. And it's actually like a nice little bit of improvement. And I had the note here, bless them, they are actually trying. So I need to make sure I point that out so I'm not being completely unfair to them.
True.
Finally, this was how the episode ended. I wasn't even really sure where it was going. So for Grandparents' Day, Mrs. Tibble takes them to a place where where they can actually kind of be themselves, and it's appropriate. They go to like a medieval times style, not so much medieval times because it's not like an arena, but it is a medieval style restaurant where there are no utensils. It's kind of like what would you call the seating that they're in, where it's just kind of like a long table.
Yeah, they're like pews or something, but not quite. It's like yeah, it's like you said, a long table, a medieval style table,
Cafeteria style seating, maybe.
Yeah. Like an indoor park bench, but long.
Yeah. So, and everybody's eating like giant turkey legs with their hands and stuff like that because Mrs. Tibble saw how good that they were being, so she wanted to go somewhere where they could all relax. And so they don't need to use utensils. All they need to do is put the bib on and just go to town. And everybody's happy. And this is the kind of happy medium and a little bit of a reward. The restaurant's name, by the way, is called Fit for a King, which is a great restaurant name. And that's the end of the episode. The Tibbles actually make good for once. So credit to them where I normally don't give it. All right, it's time for us to take a look and review the episode a little bit. Let's go back to Arthur Sells Out. What did you make of this one?
I actually was really entertained by Arthur Sells Out. It's a very funny episode. I had lots of great lines written down. I really liked the way they incorporated all those kind of season 1 throwbacks. I liked the way they used Muffy as sort of the devil on Arthur's shoulder, teaching him the evil ways of capitalism. I liked the way they used Buster as kind of like this naive, the angel on Arthur's shoulder. Just his shock and awe when Arthur swindled James, I thought was like a really standout sequence in the episode. I liked the whole concept of the fake video game. I thought it was fun to see all the objects that Arthur was selling and the way he sold them. And I think though you pointed out, the conclusion kind of cheats because I think it would be more interesting if the game kind of ruled and was awesome and Arthur instead chose to do the right thing instead of playing the fun video game. So they do kind of cop out at the end by, 1, making the game bad, and 2, still letting Arthur play it because Muffy gets it. But with the exception of that ending, I thought it was a fun episode. I was pretty entertained throughout.
I agree. The ending was a little weak in terms of, I think it kind of betrayed the intent of Arthur's big decision a little bit. I think it would have been better if the game would have ruled and Arthur... Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly what you said.
I actually didn't notice it as much until you pointed it out, though, because I was so excited to see what the game looked like that I kind of forgot about all that, and I was like, oh my god, they're playing this weird game on this Dreamcast where the character doesn't animate.
That said, I agree with you. I liked this episode too. I thought it was a very interesting thing for Arthur to talk about, and it shows how the show can modernize itself by talking about the ethics of selling stuff online or just being your own marketplace in a very kid-friendly way. I thought that the way that it progressed was fun. I liked Muffy's role in this. I thought that she had a perfectly good role to play and showed that she's can be very competent at certain things. So I appreciate that Muffy is not as helpless as she is sometimes made out to be. And Arthur had to make some real ethical choices here. And aside from the very end of it, I thought that it represented it pretty well. So I would say this is a thumbs up for me. Positive episode with some really funny lines too here and there. So I was happy to watch it. I would also say that I liked Mind Over Manners, but a little bit less than Arthur Sells Out. I'd say Sells Out is my favorite of the two, but Mind Over Manners, I appreciate what's being done for here. Now, of course, this is another instance of the second half of an episode being something that is directed a bit more towards kids and towards little kids. And clearly what's meant to be taken away here is the idea of social cues of stop, look, and listen, understand your environment, and act accordingly, which can be a hard lesson to impart, especially if you're a bit more towards the Tibble end of the spectrum, like our young buddy Lucas. But it's a good lesson to try and learn. I think this is an effective way to do it for in order for a younger mind to understand it. And I do have to give the characters credit. They are actually trying. Like, they're not just, like, sometimes they're just represented as monsters, essentially, of just, like, basically like little sharks. Like, they don't care about anything. They just want to destroy. And just like, I like it better when we allow the Tibbles to be human, when we humanize them a little bit. And then that way they can be their messy and horrendous selves, but because you know that that's not all that they are. They're not just like little evil trolls. They can actually change and get better. So this was actually pretty nice. I also do. I wish we got to spend more time with Mrs. Tibble, and I would love some more focus on her in the future. And I would love an episode with her and Grandma Thora. That would be great for me. So yeah, not a whole lot in terms of, it's mostly a message episode for little kids, but I thought it was entertaining enough, and it is nice just to see the Tibbles progress in a way. We know, and this won't lead to lasting change or anything like that, but it is kind of good to see, like, oh, okay, they are capable of learning.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted about Mind Your Manners. I really like kind of the impetus for the episode. Like, I love the way it opens and her trying to find a babysitter, and I like that from the jump, the Tibble's heart is in the right place, even though they don't really know what to do with that positive inclination, right? Like, they want to do something nice for their grandmother, but they're so chaotic and misbehaved that they just keep screwing up at every turn. And I really like the way the episode ties up, sort of with them really trying their best and, like you said, learning and growing. And I also love that Molly kind of was their teacher in that sense. The more we see of Molly and James, the better. Two James spawnings in this episode. And I like the way it ends, too, where they go to the medieval times, and I thought that was a fun twist. I think my problem is there's maybe one too many sequences of the Tibbles being rambunctious and gross. Like, I think we got the point across with the first two, and by the time we get to the third, where it's just like, and it's funny, but I started to check out what it was just kind of the Tibbles misbehaving after the Tibbles misbehaving. It was like, it made the episode feel really long, because it's a little samey in the middle.
Right.
With that being said, I think, when you look at the episode as a whole, it's an interesting episode, and I don't necessarily think it's bad, but yeah, I could do without kind of 3 to 4 different separate set pieces of the Tibbles just basically being the Tasmanian devil. I think you could have conveyed kind of, the Tibbles don't behave well in fewer. I know it's trying to like show that like for instance, the last sequence, like the one where they're pretending to do etiquette, the purpose is that they're trying, they're making an effort, but it's just so like they're like slathering on this like gunk on each other's faces, and it's funny, but I also just kind of started to check out, and I was like checking my clock being like, oh my goodness, how long is this episode? So yeah, not necessarily wholly negative on it, but a little bit conflicted.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I think that's where a lot of my frustration comes from when it's like the Tibbles, when that's all we see of them, is this kind of like slathering each other in mud and guck and all this kind of stuff, and just like, well, then why are we doing this?
I think the all-time greatest Tibble episode is still the one where, and I can't remember who it is, but it's either Tommy or Timmy is sick.
Yes.
And then we get to see the complete change in behavior. That's a fascinating episode.
And you get to see what it takes to be a Tibble, essentially, and it's actually really hard work that only they are suited to do. Yeah, so I would say a solid episode, and was very happy to spend some time with this, and we're happy that you chose to spend time with us as well. And you'll get plenty of opportunities to do that as we are getting ready to wrap up this episode of Elwood City Limits. Now, I can't exactly tell you what's going to be coming next week for our patrons, for our next episode for the kids, because this is up to another listener vote. The poll is currently active for all of our patrons on patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And we have 4 options to choose from. I won't tell you what's winning. I don't want to sway your vote one way or the other. But I can tell you that the 4 shows that, one of which we will choose to do an episode about, include Word Girl, Boo Bah, Maya and Miguel, and Dinosaur Train. So we are still waiting to see who will take home the win and which show we will be talking about next week on For the Kids for our Patreon listeners. But we know exactly what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks for the next episode of Elwood City Limits. Now, this the title of this episode certainly has me intrigued. We're going to be talking about Buenos Noches Visita and Prunella Packs It In.
Whoa, both of those very intriguing.
Yeah, two character. I mean, Prunella has gotten some featured episodes before, but it has been a while. And Visita, we have not heard from her in what feels like seasons. So I'm really wondering what's going on with her. And we hope that you will continue to join us for episodes down the road. We are getting up to the end of the year. My goodness. And we're going to be keeping things going as we approach the holiday season. Next time you'll hear from us, it will be, well, it'll be, I mean, you could argue it's Christmas time now, and I support that, but it's like, it's going to be really Christmas time by the next time you hear from us. So we'll be happy to break out the jingle bells and ring in that time of the season with you when we return here on Elwood City Limits, or if you're a patron, next week on For the Kids.
That's right. If you're looking for Christmas Rex, I just posted, all these people are talking about Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Die Hard's a Christmas movie. And me, big Gremlins fan. Gremlins, also a Christmas movie. But if you're looking for some other kind of outside Christmas Rex, I posted on Twitter today, there's lots of great options that aren't just Die Hard. Metropolitan, Wilt Stillman movie, great sort of costume, black comedy, Wilt Stillman movie, very dry humor. Go, great Pulp Fiction ripoff from the late 90s, Katie Holmes, taking place on Christmas, a rave on Christmas, super fun movie. And of course, the legendary Eyes Wide Shut, which is, of course, a Christmas movie as well, Will. So, those recs on my Twitter for this Christmas season.
Did you see that they released a new vinyl for...
I did see that. I don't really remember the soundtrack to Eyes Wide Shut, besides, it being, those really ominous kind of piano chords. But still, excited. I'm a big fan of that movie. I think it's underrated in Kubrick's filmography, so that definitely checking that out.
And I will have to recommend, of course, Christmas classic that I adopted in the last couple of years is It's a Wonderful Life. Trust me, it is that good. Your parents and your grandparents have probably been talking about It's a Wonderful Life for decades and decades. It is that good. And I'm glad that I got past my own personal bias and checked it out. Also, a new movie that is indeed that good. Speaking of Arthur Christmas. Now, this isn't an Arthur movie. It's a CGI movie about the Santa Claus family. I assure you, it's way better than it sounds. It's awesome. It's a yearly tradition for my wife and I. So Arthur Christmas and It's a Wonderful Life. And there's plenty more. Maybe we'll sprinkle in some more as December goes along. But thank you so much for joining us once again. My name's Will Young, and that's Elwood City Limits. And for Lucas Mancini,
even the Woogle?
We'll see you next time.